Civil Aviation Authority, and in particular Director General Alessio Quaranta, for being also with us today. Alessio will share his assessment of the pilots organized by Aeroporti di Roma. And finally, I'd like to thank also Philip Cornelis, Director of Air Transport at the European Commission. Philip will tell us how the European Commission is looking at these experiments, and he will share with us his views on what would be the way forward. I think we all agree that European and wider international cooperation and alignment is essential in this crisis and in moving forward. After Philip, we will have 20 minutes. You will be able to ask your questions through the chat box. We've received already several questions. And of course, each of the participants to be on mute. I will now start resetting the scenes and look at where we stand. I hope you can all see the presentation. Clearly, setting the scenes means starting with the devastation we've experienced as airports over the last years. I think the graph we can see here speaks for itself. We're still waiting for a recovery, and if you look at the extreme bottom right of that graph, you can see also the first 10 days of January, and indeed the figures are not improving at all. Looking at the outlook for this year in terms of passenger traffic, of course, for us as airports, it will be entirely shaped by the new variants and the vaccination. And actually, we find ourselves bracing now with two epidemics, the old initial COVID-19 pandemic and, of course, the kind of new epidemic coming from the new variants. This has led us as ACI Europe to downgrade our forecast for the year. We did that on the 21st of January. At the time, we were looking at a base case and a pessimistic case, as you can see here. But actually, I think we're more and more moving to the pessimistic case, which means potentially more than 60% decrease again in air traffic compared to 2019. This, of course, reflects and is the result of tightened ban and travel restrictions and travel bans decided since December increasingly by European states, but now being reinforced by the EU Council recommendations adopted yesterday and to be adopted today, both for intra-EU travel and external travel, where basically we can see that increasing national travel is to accumulate a test being decided for international travel and what is being proposed by the European Commission as to do so. This is resulting in increasing risk and damages, of course, for our industry, as we see the EU vaccination strategy in disarray. We all read through the significant delays now across the EU in terms of the vaccination, with some countries indicating that the delays are up to 8 weeks, but still to be confirmed. That means that the target set by the Commission to have 70% of the EU population being vaccinated by the summer is potentially becoming unrealistic, and that when we look at the potential for herd immunity upon which we as aviation depend for our recovery, increasingly as a distant prospect. The impact on us, on Europe's airports and aviation, is that, of course, travel restrictions and travel bans are likely to last much longer than what we had thought, potentially into and even potentially beyond the summer. And that means that the recovery of aviation is becoming much more elusive. So clearly, as airports, we will need more financial aid in the short term. We are now discussing this intensely with the European Commission because the current state aid framework is insufficient. And we will need, crucially, to move from the current travel restrictions and bans towards an evolving regime of travel conditions, which should gradually allow the restoration of the free movement within the ECDC within the European Union, but also in terms of international connectivity. Of course, that will need to be risk-based, data-driven. It means an approach which will need to be much more targeted and objective, an approach that will need to be equally effective in fighting the pandemic, but also less damaging vis-à-vis our sector. And indeed, this is going to be all about saving lives and saving livelihoods at the same time. Of course, moving towards an evolving regime of travel conditions will require other prerequisites and improvement in the epidemiological situation in the coming weeks. We're all very much hopeful for that. But it will also mean looking at resolving a set of issues. And there's many issues to be resolved, including knowing a bit more what is actually the presence of the variants in the EU and the role of the variants in community transmission. I think we're clearly lacking data there. Looking at whether vaccination will effectively avoid transmissibility. And looking also at potentially having forecasts and scenarios by the ECDC on herd immunity. We don't have these for now. Looking at what testing capabilities and casking capacities will be, how they will evolve. Looking at how we're going to do a risk assessment that is really data-driven and scientifically based. Looking at health, again, looking at passenger loading, set issues to resolve. Clearly, there's no easy and magic wand. Moving forward, clearly, COVID-19 and what Aeroporti di Roma is in terms of pilots is very much of interest for us today. And with that, I will now pass the floor to Marco Troncone, CEO of Rome Airport, so he can present the experience of the pilots of Aeroporti di Roma. Marco, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Oliver. I'm trying. Non vedo più il Hold on. Okay. While we have a bit of a trouble here with the PC. Anyways, for the introduction, I will have the presentation up and running in a few moments. You very complex, more and more complex. We have been all been left very disappointed over the last few months with, frustrated by missed recovery. Here we go. And we've been revising for time with much hope. It may not be the magic bond, solving the issue overnight, and a different aviation setup, different aviation processes setup may be in place for some time. So I think we need to work on a strategic response rather than a tactical one, and switch from or integrate an approach of managing the crisis, focusing on today, also with a perspective related to the short, medium term. And I think, again, we need to get prepared in time. Putting together this new normal can take time, based also on our experience that we experience here in Rome. But we need to leave no stone unturned to make sure that we don't lose one single passenger when better times will come. We can't afford it, and our countries can't afford it. So the overall idea behind this webinar is, again, to share our experience, to share our position, our recipe, which is finally a concrete case grounded on field. And if of interest, of course, this can be utilized in all our Europeans dialogue with respective member states policymakers in order to get this in place, possibly have a uniform and we trust even more effective set of measures as we move forward. So, getting into the presentation, starting with a quite an obvious, let me say, statement. We're all pretty convinced, but it's worthwhile anyways, making the air travel per se is totally safe. So we have now a balance of nearly 1 year. We have no evidence of any outbreak happened during aviation processes, no incidents due to procedural gaps, to fail to comply with rules. It's all nice and safe. As also IATA is testimony, is witnessing, reporting, we all know a few months ago, just one case out of 27 million passengers. So basically, we can say that getting an infection within the airport facilities and on board is basically zero. I think this has been definitely understood by our policymakers and by the market as well. And also, the aviation industry also can present a high degree of control and a degree of traceability, which is of the essence as we move forward. And we see how this will be important also for our recipe. So the current focus, of course, is on avoiding the import-export of infection across critical regions. So avoid the infection to move around with persons. And the response put in place by the states from Europe to that end does not appear effective, as you were also mentioning before. Since the very early stages, most measures were oriented on the application of self-quarantine. Self-quarantine is now apparent it is not the right. Firstly, because it's not an effective health measure. It's not 100% safe. It's a fiduciary obligation. It's based on the each individual's responsibility to comply with that. Is not easy to enforce, not to control. In fact, we have a number of concrete examples, even recently in the last days, in which new cases, potentially even new variants were imported, for example, from Brazil, from people that should have been in quarantine, but in actual fact made around 100 contacts happen thereafter. So this is clearly not the way. And also, again, fiduciary obligations like also testing on arrival, like we experienced in Italy in the months after the summer, last autumn, in which passengers from France, Spain, UK, etc., were obliged to carry out the test within 48 hours after arrival. Well, we have reasons why to believe that this was not really the case. Probably the passengers doing the test in the airport facilities after arrival was ranging between 15 to 30%. Then possibly they could have carried out the test somewhere else, but you always have the doubt. So it's not 100% safe. And also, very importantly, is a totally disproportionate measure because, of course, it's everybody. Everybody, so infected people as well as harmless people, which is, of course, the very vast majority. So it doesn't work. Very recently, we've seen a vast, let me say, switch orientation to pre-departure testing throughout Europe and even in the US. But yet we still are observing a very uncoordinated, even used, let me say, setup. There is a stronger, let me say, disuniformity in terms of which kind of test passengers to carry out, how long before they should do it. Some states even ask for 2 tests, PCR and an antigenic to be done altogether before flying. So it's all pretty confused, even though in a way we're getting there. And also, we have also to see that also based on the latest guidelines agreed on January 21st, still quarantine is within the recipe. Again, if the target is to block connectivity altogether, maybe we're on the right track. But of course, I think we have to give ourselves a chance to manage this in a wiser manner. So if we are unhappy with a proposition based on eliminating the disease by killing the patient, so we need to find something different. And what is different again, that would be what we're putting on ground here in Italy and in Rome, to have pre-departure tests for all passengers with a very clear and rigorous certified protocol assessed by all the relevant health authorities, in which basically all passengers get a test that would trade let me say, uncertain obligation of self-quarantine for a totally controlled and maximum safety measure on 100% of passengers, which may also be, shall be totally documented and controlled. And also this adds, if ever needed, again, more safety perception on board. And clearly, this would basically allow for restriction to be removed, appearing totally useless. Therefore, this also appears to the right way forward to sustain mobility as we move forward. So this is quite important. We think certainly, again, as the degree of control made on 100% of departing passengers from critical origins is in place, and hence being this the right proposition, even when the epidemic is raging, which is just now, this will also be probably a protocol which may be becoming totally useful, probably still in place for some time, even after we abandon an emergency situation. We're all looking at the vaccination campaigns. Vaccination campaigns have started relatively timely, end of last year, beginning of this year, are progressing relatively slowly, possibly, but consistently. Possibly the target that the President von der Leyen is looking at, so herd immunity by summer, may be potentially utopic, but we will be getting there probably sometime during this year. In Italy, we're targeting, and this seems a realistic target, Q4 this year to arrive to herd immunity. But the herd immunity, again, will not be really the killer application. It may allow for the health situation to not to be a critical one in terms of handling the overall situation by our health facilities and hospitals, but will not probably allow for the complete eradication of the infection. So we need to make a distinction between herd immunity, which certainly will, normalize a bit the situation, and certainly will add a lot on passenger confidence. So we think that will be really the cornerstone, allowing for some traffic recovery to resume, but will not be the totally turning page, allowing for the, cancellation, elimination, and eradication of the virus. So there will be a long time in which the virus will be still around, while traffic volumes will be resuming. So to that end also, for all that period, which may last, we don't know for how long, hopefully for a few months, but possibly for a year or two, we need to have, again, also a good procedure in order to assist in safety and without restriction the recovery of traffic demand. The latest thing that we want to observe is traffic re-happening, infected people to move around, and have restrictions still in place in order to avoid the infection to go around. Once the virus eradication will be happening, I think then we can really look at the future with in a more normalized manner. So that's put simple as our position. So what did we do concretely vis-a-vis that aspiration? Firstly, just as a quick premise, of course, we devoted, as all airports throughout the world, especially in Europe, a lot of energy on implementing and promoting a safe airport proposition. Not only, of course, to ensure maximum safety for all the passengers and airport staff, but that was really of the essence, and we've seen that was really, let me say, fruitful and useful to gain our key stakeholders' trust. One of the reasons why the government here and the health authorities have listened to us over the last months is, of course, we appeared a credible counterpart, and this allowed, of course, for more openness for the merit of our proposal. Then, as rapid testing started to become more accessible in terms of availability, in terms of cost, in terms of speed of response, and as this was embraced also domestically as a viable mean to test the population, of course we invested a lot. So we worked on integrating testing capacity within the terminal area, And that was happening since mid-August last year, of course, in cooperation with the relevant health authorities, and namely the Regione Lazio as well as the Ministry of Health. And we today have within the terminal buildings 3 areas, both landside and airside, allowing for a capacity to date around 5,000 tests per day or slightly more. Which is anyways scalable. And on top of that, we also worked on implementing a major testing facility, which is a drive-through one in our long-term car park, which is, of course, sadly more empty than full, so it can allow for such facility. Again, allowing for that is open to the citizenship. Of course, it's the most convenient place also for our passengers. So, integrating testing capacity in the airport is possible. Of course, we don't think that tests should be always and solely performed within the airport. This is not really the answer, but integrating testing capacity within the airport is possible to a meaningful extent. On such grounds, we have put together our idea protocol, and we have started to open a dialogue with the government and with all relevant policymakers here in Italy. Quite a complex, an articulated set of bodies, scientific committee, disease control center, and so on, as well as the Ministry of Health. But of course, showcasing a concrete case on top of a protocol put on paper was probably really useful. And this is what basically we did on the Rome-Milan route, which was opened on a COVID-free, on a COVID-tested basis on September the 16th. It's quite apparent that, of course, the Rome-Milan route was not really the target from a medical perspective, but it was important for us to firstly be really hands-on operationally on putting together this protocol in place, and also again showcasing that process to our policymakers. And that was done in cooperation with Regione Lazio, who issued an order just to allow for this experimentation to be put in place. I would say mission accomplished, as this allowed in November then to replicate that protocol where needed, so on transatlantic routes from US. Mission accomplished, and also mission seized, as we just now have decided to close that test on Rome-Milan again, which I think, again, as I said, accomplished its mission. In November, we start on more serious grounds, so on non-EU routes. The most relevant for us, our market of election, of course, is US. And this also was quite a challenging ground from a medical perspective, because you'll know that US is not really one of the easiest grounds in terms of the epidemiological situations. And the idea was then to start. The order was November the 23rd. It's worth to say that order was issued jointly by 3 ministers in Italy, so the Minister of Transportation together with the Ministry of Health and of Foreign Affairs. So there was a very strong backing in the end by the government. Again, this should be of encouragement for other member states, and this also from a political standpoint we deem may be relevant to disseminate and to present in other geographies. We started with the JFK, so from New York to Rome on December the 8th with Alitalia, shortly followed by Delta Airlines from Atlanta. Atlanta, you know, being of course the hub of Delta, so behind Atlanta, clearly the most origins from US could have been eligible to travel to Fiumicino through Atlanta. The order also allowed for a corridor between Italy and Germany, which sadly didn't happen. While there was openness on the Italian side, on the German side, unfortunately, the political situation was not ready enough in order to get it started. So this stays there and potentially is an opportunity as we move forward. Okay, we started early December. We now have almost a couple of months behind us. We can draw both from an operational standpoint, from a medical standpoint, and we can say that the results are absolutely encouraging and positive. In terms of operational effectiveness, that process, which has been, studied in all the details and optimized over time, proved to be certainly effective. So no disruptions occurred within the aviation processes, no impacts whatsoever on the on-time performance, and ability also to carry out all the tests in a sufficient time, so that also the passenger satisfaction was there. Over 90% of passengers, based on surveys that we carried out on those flights, would like to travel on a COVID-tested flight. 80% of passengers said that was a reason why to travel in the future. Only 1.5% of passengers, that was mostly on the Rome-Milan route, which is also a business intensive, route, said this, on the other hand, would not have been a reason why to travel. So a problem, a minimum percentage. But more than that, again, from a medical perspective, as we see now in more detail, the percentage of confirmed cases were only 0.13%, or 1.3 out of 1,000 cases, out of all passengers. So we can say COVID-tested corridors are really clean corridors, basically substantially COVID-free corridors? The answer is yes. So those prove to be an effective, travel pipeline, even from origins that present a medical situation which is a troublesome one, which is the case of US. Considering also the US during these periods has a level of prevalence which is even higher than the average that we are observing in Europe. So again, this is a challenging and meaningful ground. We also noticed that how we reported that this protocol was also, looked with very favor and with interest by the United Nations World Travel Tourism Organization, that has identified in that protocol as the reference benchmark to be promoted. We as ADR have participated to two crisis committees of the organization, and again, this was embraced as the policy to try and disseminate and leverage on global. In more detail, some numbers. First of all, what happened on traffic volumes? The numbers that we saw in terms of load factor, in terms of number of passengers per flight, were very, very, very promising. So you can see the level of factors on those longer routes, so operated with a wide body, ranging from 80 to 140 passengers per flight, are not sky high. That's true. So we're still talking of maximum load factors in the region of 50%. But that was still reached and achieved in a situation in which traffic was extremely soft. So at least in terms of growth rate, you can see that this is even in triple-digit region. So the increase of traffic on those routes was visible and strong. And on the right-hand side of this chart, you can see that probably the most important evidence out of this. So how many positives in the end did we inherit with that pipeline? Let me say. So out of roughly 4,000 passengers, basically, as I said, 99.87%, so we would say basically all were negative in the end. So the ability of putting in place an effective pre-departure testing, the case was even a double test that was decided by Delta, allowed basically for this, result. The protocol in this first issue also provided for a test on arrival, just to double check, given the specific situation of US. And we found out of these roughly 4,000 passengers, 17 passengers positive to the antigen test, which 12 of which were not confirmed by the PCR test. So in the end, the actual positive test passengers out of this sample were only 5, which to us tells again a virus prevalence close to 0. Some more commentary on that. Out of these 4 cases found, 5 cases found, those, we have to say, were concentrated only on one of the 2 routes. And going upstream, they result negative passengers positive in the end, but negative pre-departure molecular test for 2 passengers and 3 negative to the antigen test. But most importantly, we also tried to investigate, to extent possible, on the possible false negative phenomenon, which is of course the most relevant from a medical side. So we cross-referenced the data of the positive cases managed by the relevant health authorities with the arrival passengers, and we found out that we found only 2 occurrences out of those 4,000 passengers which happened to become positive after the arrival. But of course, further assessment should be carried out whether those were infected passengers during the flight or they got infected shortly after arrival. But in all cases, we're talking of a 0.07% of the total sample. Again, to us, this tells basically a 0. And also comparing the level of positivity of those arrivals with the other passengers flows we have managed from other routes. I'm referring to intra-EU flows which were due to carry out a test on arrival for a few months during last autumn. Well, the level of positivity rate is much lower, half basically, the COVID tested flights rather than those intra-EU flows. So again, all in all, the protocol seems to work. And in fact, again, as I said, not only we're seeing a new polarization of measures within Europe, we're looking at the pre-departure test, but also we're also seeing that in US, the latest CDC order, the Center for Disease Control of US, issued on January 26, have enforced all passengers inbound into US to carry out a test before departure, which is again exactly what we are doing now. So no changes, of course, were necessary on this protocol to comply with this guideline of the CDC. Hence, what now? This trial ends as per the order issued by the government on 15th February, so in a fortnight, basically. And of course, we're in talks with the relevant authorities in order to get it extended. And we, of course, we remain absolutely optimistic about this. And also, we're calling for this protocol to be the reference policy at the national level. So we're asking, and it's important that this, of course, becomes to be spreading out throughout the nation, and of course in Europe. So we think that also based on the declaration of the Ministry of Transportation, calling for the application of this protocol also to other airports, at least the most important one in the ones in northern Italy, we remain optimistic that this is happening. So it's important to convey at the European level that this is becoming, again, really the position of the country. So this is gaining certainly much more momentum. But is to be extended time-wise and national-wise. Of course, we try to also to enlarge the perimeter of the network eligible to be carried out under this protocol to a wider number of routes. So we're also asking to increase the number of origins from the US territory, as well as extending these to other important geographies. Probably top of the list would be Japan, also because of the relatively mild situation in terms of epidemic, relatively, and also in consideration of the fact that still the Olympic Games this year may still remain a target. We'll see. So there is a strong motivation from Japan also to try and get equipped in a viable manner. But of course, we're also looking at other geographies in Southern America, as well as Middle East and Asia. And ideally, on this one, we are less optimistic at this stage. Of course, we'll need to try and enlarge also or loosen the restrictions in terms of reasons for traveling. Today, this experimentation still foresees the confirmation of the non-essential travel reasons as so this law only looks at essential traveling. This is likely to stay after the 15th of February, but this has to be a target again once we will be approaching the herd immunity and a more sustainable epidemiological situation, hopefully for this summer. Next steps in terms of operating on the operating front, because of course, if this protocol has to leave an experimental, let me say, concept and become a more industrialized kind of process, some again enablers have to be put in place. So first of all, again, testing. We're working, of course, to fully integrate pre-boarding testing within the airport services. It will come a time, if numbers will be rising, that let me say, the operations and most importantly the cost of the test, which today is borne by the public health authorities, will not be borne by them any longer. So that should be carried out by passengers on a private basis. Hence, we're working now to deploy testing facilities directly managed by the airport, so allowing passengers to purchase their test and to integrate, of course, that test within the airport processes. As I said, the airport facilities allow already for a meaningful capacity. This certainly is also scalable. We think we can arrive densifying the current areas up to somewhere around 15,000 tests per day, which is certainly let me say, a significant capacity. However, as I said, our position remains, of course, to favor and encourage off-airport testing before departure, as that test has to be carried out 72 hours before departure, so there is the time, and manage in-airport testing capacity mostly on a reservation basis, so in an orderly and sustainable fashion. Secondly, digitalization of processes. Now, as numbers may possibly go up from certain origins in terms of testing, and as paper starts becoming quite, thick. I mean, and as processes will become a bit more complicated and also a bit more sensitive in terms of handling of data. We're working on a way to digitalize and let me say handle in a more automated manner all the documentation regarding the health declarations which passengers have to be produced, and that's of course for so in a form of a health portal. Of course, that with the aim to work on the convenience and the ease of management of those certificates of negativity, but also on the trustworthiness and the safe storage of, again, sensitive data. And also let me say, the digital warehouse, if I may say so, it's of the essence for health authorities to support contact tracing, which is one of the challenges which authorities are facing now. And of course, today, this may be handling negativity certificates. Looking forward, these definitely may also address immunity certificates or vaccination records. Meanwhile, we already again launched, of course, on an experimental basis, one of the first, let me say, health passes. So again, working on making the handling of the certification negativity more easy, more convenient, and also safe. So early January, we started the implementation of one of the passes which are available in the market. We picked up AOK pass. So pretty simple. The passenger will, after having his rapid test and eventually receiving a certificate, a proof of negativity, well, that proof of negativity will be fed into the application by the medical doctor, so in an authentic and controlled and reliable manner, resulting in a QR code, and with that QR code, together with the QR code of the boarding pass, the passenger may make his way to the gate. So very nice, easy, and convenient. And again, the idea is to also include possibly vaccination certificates within this platform. If, of course, vaccinated people may be, let me say, equalized to negative tested people. You know that there is still some analysis in place to understand whether people after getting a vaccine may still be infected and carry the virus. So once this will be solved, also vaccinated people may also be. And to conclude, talking about vaccination, again, we're trying to do our part on that front. As we said, vaccination campaigns are in process, are going forward with, of course, with some complexities, because it's a major challenge. We have deployed, dedicated, again, a portion of our long-term stay park in the airport to a major vaccination center, which has been erected and is ready, it's good to go. So we just need, people and material to green light it and start working. Clearly, the operations will be managed by the health authorities, by the medical staff of the Red Cross. But that's again a major vaccination center for that. Definitely, we hope may give a bit of momentum to this effort. So just to conclude, again, we think that also based on the emerging operational and most importantly medical evidence, this COVID tested flight protocol seems to be confirmed to be viable and meaningful and useful way forward, combining increased capacity with the ability for people to go around, so sustainable connectivity. The idea, of course, is to focus that protocol where needed. So it was initially conceived to address non-EU routes where quarantine restrictions were in place, and that stays for the moment the main focus, but this may also be as required, as needed, but we think, of course, on an ad hoc basis, based on predetermined criteria, also be rolled out on certain intra-EU routes, again, with the idea to remove unuseful restrictions. So that's the overall idea, and we hope you find this of interest. And again, myself, as well as Ivan Bassato, our accountable manager, who has worked a lot on this protocol, remain at your disposal wherever you need for this protocol to be again promoted throughout Europe. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Marco, for this very comprehensive overview of the testing pilots you have been putting in place and still working on. I think there's a lot of interesting findings out of your experience. Notably, I think the very low positivity rates that you have registered for passengers traveling and being tested. And how actually this means that air travel, based on your experience, based on those tests, clearly was not impacting the prevalence of the virus in Italy. I think that's a lot of food for thought for everybody. I will now go to Alessio Quaranta, who's Director General of the Italian Civil Aviation Authority, who will give us his feedback, his views on the experience that has been done at Aeroporti di Roma, and how the Italian authorities are looking at it moving forward. Alessio, thank you for joining us. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Olivier, and good morning, everybody. First of all, of course, thank you to ACI Europe and to ADR for organizing this webinar and for inviting me to say just a few words. And of course, thank you also to Philip Cornelis for joining us this morning, because from our perspective as regulators, it's extremely important to have on board Commission in these issues. Just a word from my side. What is clearly emerged from your presentation, Olivier, from your introduction this morning, is that unfortunately we will not reach the goal of 70% of vaccination of European citizens by next summer, which means, of course, the consequence that bans will last longer, because, of course, we don't know how long will still last this pandemic. It brings to me to a simple conclusion, which is that as regulators, we need to accompany the recovery phase of air transport as much as we can. First of all, trying to restore as much as possible the confidence of passengers in our systems, trying to bring back passengers to our infrastructure safely in order to restart operation in a normal setting where, of course, possible. This is the reason why we immediately, as Italian Civil Aviation Authority, committed to support the pilot presented by ADR, because it's the only way to try to, let's say, between brackets, give an answer to our system, to our sector, and trying to go back to normality, even if we don't know when it will be possible to go back to the previous situation. But of course, we need to try, and we must try to make any possible effort. The reason why I told before, we immediately supported this initiative, and that is why having the possibility to verify the very great result, very encouraging, presented by ADR this morning, we immediately contacted our health authority together with our Ministry of Transport in order to try to expand this pilot phase, this trial, to other reality in Italy. And we had a couple of weeks ago a meeting with all the interest parties involved, Ministry for Transport, Ministry for Health, but also Ministry for Foreign Affairs, in order to try to set a similar system involving other airports, mainly in principle Milan Airport, trying not only to replace the experience done in Fiumicino on one or two routes, but to try to expand as much as possible other connections in order to trying, as I told before, as much as we can to go back, even slowly, to normality. I think this is the only way in this frame we can act, considering that we don't know how long this pandemic will last. We don't know today if the vaccination procedure will be effective as we can imagine, as we hope, of course. But at the same time, we need to try to relaunch the system, of course, putting passengers in a healthy and safe box, let's say. That's the reason why I think this trial performed by ADR could be and should be and could be easily done, enlarged and expanded not only in Italy, but maybe involving other European countries as much as we can. We had a lot of contact with EASA. By the way, let me thank EASA, CDC, and the European Commission for their work until now, because without the intervention last May in publishing the so-called famous EASA CDC guidelines, maybe it wouldn't be possible to organize such an experiment like ADR is doing in Fiumicino. So, just to conclude my brief intervention, of course, we are at the disposal of the system to put any effort we can have in trying to be as near as we can to operators and to passengers and to other institutions in order to I'm sorry to repeat myself again, but I think I must insist on this aspect to try to go back to normality as soon as possible, even we perfectly know that we need time to do it. But of course, it shouldn't be discouraging for us to commit ourselves, and of course we are doing proposal not only of ADR but any other Italian airport, but also to ACI Europe to replace this experience involving other countries. And of course, we are, of course, no matter that, a disposal commission to share all our experiences. And thank you again to Philip for being today with us. Thank you, Olivia. I think I will stop here also because I think I use all my 5 minutes, maybe even longer. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Alessio. I think we, of course, welcome very much all the support that, as Italian Civil Aviation Authority, you've been given to ADR, and your wish to possibly extend those pilots to other Italian airports and beyond at European level. I think one thing that strikes me is the way you have worked very closely with your health authorities in Italy. I think this is something that is still missing in many countries. I think we see health authorities and transport authorities not necessarily working very closely together. I think we have a lot of progress to make also at European level on this. So I think you're pushing in that direction is somehow setting an example. I will now pass the floor to Philip Cornelis from the European Commission, so that Philip can give us his reaction and his thoughts about the way forward in what remains indeed a very difficult situation at the moment. And of course, we are very grateful for Philippe being with us and for all the cooperation that we enjoy and we get from DG Move at the European Commission in these moments. Philippe, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Olivier. Happy to be with you this morning. Thank you very much for the invitation. And happy to share a few reactions and thoughts from our side here in Brussels. First of all, also our congratulations to Aeroporti di Roma for their initiative already a number of months ago to start those trials as one of the first to do so, and I would say one of the most persevering airports in this area, and I think this is indeed very welcome to continue this work in what is still difficult circumstances. We have also from our side been working in the direction of developing testing protocols for aviation, because we do believe that going forward there will be a role for COVID testing in restoring air travel. Which is very much our focus, to work towards a recovery of the air travel sector. And that's why we have been working together with EASA, the European Aviation Safety Agency, and the European Center for Disease Prevention and Control, ECDC, on a health safety protocol. A few months ago, we added a section on precisely testing. And we've also been conducting similar work in the context of the International Civil Aviation Organization that set up a task force on COVID-related matters, and also there a manual on testing was produced a couple of months ago. Now, the implementation of those recommendations and guidelines so far has been, at least perspective, a little bit disappointing. Clearly, the situation has not enabled the testing to become a vector for resuming air travel yet. We do believe that this will come. And I must say we are very appreciative also of the excellent collaboration we're having in Europe with my colleagues, Directors General of Civil Aviation, including the support of Alessio Quaranta, who we just heard. All those guidelines and manuals start from the premise that we should have a risk-based approach, which anyway we are used to in aviation. In the area of safety in general, and here we're talking about health safety. So here too a risk-based approach is called for, but we see that there is indeed a very low risk tolerance in many governments. Today, I would say even more so than a couple of months ago. Despite the fact that we have started vaccination campaigns around Europe, and we are on track to complete them in the course of this year. We are also seeing the emergence of those new strains, and they have been indeed a game changer for travel, and in a way has set us back to the beginning of the whole COVID crisis last year, with a lot of pressure to close borders again. We've managed to avoid the complete closure of borders or to avoid the imposition of flight bans, such as we saw in the beginning of 2020. But we have seen member states and countries around the world reintroducing stricter border measures, in some cases prohibiting the arrival of passengers from certain countries and areas, but definitely maintaining restrictions on non-essential travel, and on those who are allowed to travel, requiring tests and quarantine. This latter point on testing and quarantine is to some extent new, and I would say, despite all the current difficulties and the observation that things will get worse before they get better, my perception is that the increased attention to testing protocols, also in the most recent Council recommendations that are being adopted today and yesterday in Brussels by the member states in Council, that testing is playing an increasing role, and we see a level of convergence on what constitutes a good testing regime. Such as the ubiquitous now protocol of a PCR test within 72 hours before travel, possibly combined with an antigen test shortly before departure or after arrival. In some cases, alas for aviation, still combined with quarantine in the country of arrival. I must say I do agree with previous speakers that even when the situation will get better, when we get out of the winter in the Northern Hemisphere in Europe, when vaccination will have proceeded and reached a significant proportion of the population, even then, testing is probably going to be with us for a longer time. And therefore, it does make sense to still work on testing protocols, particularly now that we also have an increased agreement that antigenic tests can play a role. There was a lot of skepticism on the rapid antigen tests a few months ago. In the meantime, more studies are available, and the tests have improved, and we do have now in Europe an agreement, also on the basis of a Council recommendation, on where rapid antigen tests can play a role, and the bar has been set at 90% sensitivity for those tests, which means not as good as PCR, but quite close in their reliability. So there are some interesting developments, as I said, more convergence on the role of testing and the introduction of antigen tests in those protocols, and I would say let's build on that. We do have a number of issues to solve, and I wanted to put them on the table here. The first one, because we do need the help of the industry and airports like Rome and others to help us address those issues. The first I wanted to mention is the question of logistics and the ability to scale up the amount of testing, whether it is at airport or outside the airport. If we are going to require testing of very large populations, including for intra-European travel, which is a bit of a novelty in the current period, are we able to scale up? That is one question we need to address if traffic increases. The other one is how to deal with false positives and false negatives. This will be a question on false negatives that we have to answer vis-à-vis the health authorities. And the question of false positives is more a question of what to do with passengers who are turned back in reality for no reason and are denied boarding. I see from the figures that were presented by Mr. Troncone that the numbers are not very large, but still they need to be dealt with. And the third practical point is the question of certificates. Also, Aeroporti di Roma has started to work with a platform to carry those certificates. A lot of work is ongoing, both in Europe, between the health authorities, but also at the World Health Organization and at ICAO to develop criteria, because we will need probably those certificates both for tests and for vaccination in the future, and they need to be trusted and fraud-proof. And also very respectful of our strict data protection requirements. So that's a third area of further work where we will be very happy to work together with the industry to find practical solutions. And I do hope that also the medical experts will be looking at the experience in places like Rome to gain more confidence that air travel can be organized safely, and that also case importation can be limited on a risk-based approach. So to conclude, we are very keen to continue our work together, both with the industry and with my colleagues in the member states and in third countries. Things will probably get worse before they get better, but it's important to prepare for that period when things hopefully will get better. Whether it's in the spring or in the summer, we do not know yet, but definitely improving our understanding of the role of testing and working out protocols that can actually work for passengers is a very useful initiative and activity that we will follow closely and hope to take on board together with EASA and ECDC and our partners across the world. Thank you very much. Back to you.
Thank you very much, Philippe. I think you've raised, of course, a lot of issues and questions we need to keep working on. And you can rest assured, of course, that as airport industries and ACI will be at your disposal to keep working with the Commission on this. We need drive and leadership more than ever from the Commission to make sure we manage to get a European-wide approach. I think, in particular, the point you've raised in terms of the antigen testing, I think on our side we're still a little bit frustrated that there is still no full recognition of the ability or possibility to use antigen more widely for deployment also in relation to air travel. I think on health certificates, as ACI Europe, we've just sent to most of our institutional stakeholders our ACI Europe position on health certificates. We need interoperability between the different solutions that are on the table, and we need a common framework. So again, on this, we need the Commission to take the lead. And for the rest, indeed, there are also on our side many things we need to look into, in particular when it comes to logistics and to scale up. I will now. We have actually about 9 minutes now left for questions. We have received some questions before, and I've seen a few questions, so I will try to go into some of them. We have questions from Reuters, who's on the call, that was sent before. looking at the potential for extending the pilots at Rome with other airlines, asking to Marco, do you see interest from other airlines apart from Alitalia and Delta? Are you at the moment discussing with other airlines? And when do you think that there could be flights only for travelers with vaccination of health passport, Marco?
Yeah, no, certainly we're gathering a lot of interest on these COVID-tested concepts. That was the case since the very beginning. So since last autumn, we've been talking with a number of airlines, both in Europe and outside Europe, as well as also airports. So there's been very intense talks, in particular with Lufthansa, which is of course a reference airline in Europe, and that is why the order also contemplated for a corridor from Frankfurt and Munich. Then eventually this didn't happen, but we were entertaining intense talks with American Airlines, with Emirates, with KLM, Air France, a number of airlines. So, which anyways need clearly also go ahead on their side, and also we're talking with a number of airports. So we also have established a platform, say of cooperation, for example, with the Aeroporti di Roma, and with them we also solicited the interest of the respective ministries. So there is a lot of activity. It's just again to really get the ball rolling, to get some more momentum, and to achieve a bit more critical mass within Europe.
Thank you, Marco. Instead of scaling up the screening possibilities, I think that's an issue also that Philip Cornelis referred to. You've indicated that you could scale up to about 15,000 passengers, which of course, when we look at a medium to longer term recovery, is a very low passenger. So that means, I guess, that testing can surely not only happen at the airport, but we should have protocols in place that allow for screening to take place off airport and in advance of travel as well, right?
That is perfectly right. We again encourage off-airport testing, and also, again, as we said, we don't look at this protocol to be rolled out on 100% of routes. So we need also to determine the relevant thresholds above which this protocol may make sense. So on an ad hoc basis, on specific routes, this may be implemented. So the combination of being a bit more specific on routes and encouraging off-airport testing capacity should, impede the airports to be overloaded with requests. In fact, we also, from this experimentation, we're also learning how really it naturally works. For these COVID-tested flights, we found that roughly there is an 80-20 share. So 80% of passengers will take their test well before arriving to the airport, so the days before, and only 20% of those passengers will carry out the test within the airport facilities. And that is why, of course, before the long-haul flight, people want to rest totally reassured, firstly, about the time to get their test, and also about the certainty to be really negative, and avoid the risk to discover that situation minutes before boarding. So naturally, this already happens.
Thank you, Marco. Are you discussing also with authorities beyond the US authorities directly, or do you rely on the Italian authorities to establish those links with authorities of other countries that you are targeting for extending the pilots?
We of course we entertain also talks with other foreign authorities. That was pretty much the case for US. So we held intense interactions both with the local attachés of the embassies, but as well as some relevant bodies of the central administration in US. And we were following similar avenues with Japan, and of course we're encouraging also our political references to entertain talks with the relevant peers in Europe, which for Germany and France. So we're trying again to push where possible.
Thank you. A lot of work and a lot of energy, of course. put into that. Another question here is what happens to passengers being tested positive just before boarding? I guess there's a protocol set in cooperation with the health authorities to take care of those passengers, right?
Yeah. Of course, the passengers will be referring to board. Generally, even though this is a decision up to the carrier, the passenger will not lose, of course, the opportunity to fly some other time. Anyways, will have the right to be refunded, and then this will be a case handled as all the other cases. The passengers will be asked to leave and put himself into self-quarantine. So according to the relevant protocols, yeah.
Okay. There's a question also, how long does it take for passengers to receive the results? Where do they wait for the results?
Yeah, it takes up to maximum 30 minutes. So not more than that. This is the timing performance so far. And they wait close to the testing area. So we have a dedicated area where those passengers may wait for the result. Or they may receive the response to the result on their telephones. So they just can receive an SMS, or as we with this new app, they may receive an alert on their smartphone. So they can either wait there to receive a paper copy, so a hard copy of the test, or make their way towards the gate, waiting for this result to pop up on their phone.
Okay. Thank you, Marco. Another question is, how exactly is the testing integrating in the passenger flows? If you can give a bit more details on this.
Yeah, on the outbound side, the testing facilities are landside, so passengers will make their way into the terminal, where only passengers are eligible to enter the terminal facilities. So they will enter the terminal and carry out the test before passing the security gates. That is for departing passengers. As far as arrival passengers are concerned, we have deployed an area right after the boarding, the arrival gate. So the passengers make their way on the loading bridge, arrive within the terminal facilities, and immediately find their testing facilities. So they will have the test done. In that case, they will have to wait for the test, the result in that area.
Thank you, Marco. And finally, due to the time, the final questions. How are the test results of vaccination records enter into the health pass?
Yeah, I mean, today the vaccination, the negativity tests, also the vaccination records, we will have to see, because as I said, I mean, the issue here is to understand whether a vaccinated person may still get infected, yet not incurring into any symptoms possibly, but yet get infected and pass the virus to somebody else. So once this is not cleared, until this is not cleared, it will be too premature to go for a vaccination, green light or pass. If instead, on the other hand, that would be the case, so people getting a vaccine will not be able to be infected, and hence they are totally harmless, we think that there will be equalized totally to a negativity result. And that's, hence we'll have an health pass for negativity results and immunity status.
Okay. Thank you, Marco. And well, final question, because we got a few questions about this, is about are passengers requested to pay for their testing, either at the airport or when performed outside of the airport?
Yeah, at the airport today they don't pay. So the test is carried out by health authorities within our facilities. So that's for free. They can also get the test basically showing the travel document test done for free. Again, in other locations. But as I said, as numbers will be hopefully soon ramping up a bit, this probably may not be a sustainable setup any longer, and passengers will have to incur in that cost. And we also have to say, this is also interesting information for our friends outside, that the cost for that test is relatively low, so it's getting well below euros altogether, so the material and the administration. The actual test per se costs less than €5. which is a material difference, for example, what we see or observing in US, whereby, or possibly even UK, where the cost of those tests are much higher. So as the cost becomes not an issue, and also accessibility is not an issue, because, for example, any person can go into any pharmacy and get their test done, just purchasing it. We think that the barriers are low. For the moment, it's whatever.
Thank you very much, Marco. I think we're reaching the time to end this webinar. Thank you very much for sharing with us the very interesting experience of what you've been doing at Rome. We wish you, of course, the best of luck in continuing with the pilots and hopefully being able to expand them. I think for us as ACI, we will keep a very close look and liaison with Aeroporti di Roma, of course, on that. At the same time, I think one of the upcoming very important development will be how EASA and ECDC will be looking at potentially their existing guidance and guidelines on testing and quarantines for air travel. This both as a result, of course, of the new EU Council recommendation, but also based on cases like what you have been doing at Rome Airport, and the fact that indeed, based on testing without quarantines, the impact on the prevalence in the destination country appears to be almost very negligible. So I thank you all for joining us. We as ACI Europe, of course, remain at your disposal for any further information you may have. Don't hesitate to reach out to us. And we look forward to keep engaging, of course, together with ENAC, together with the European Commission. Thank you, Alessio. Thank you, Philip, also for being with us. And we wish you all a very good day, and please keep safe. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you all.